studios. This is After 9 with Scott and Kat.
Hey now. Hey friends, welcome to another Solo Scott episode of After 9. In case you missed the announcement yesterday, Kat is on vacation for a week. She'll be back on Halloween. Right now she is in Vegas celebrating her wedding anniversary, so congratulations to her and her husband. Right off the bat, I want to get to a special guest. I am so happy we're going to get to do this one. We're going to talk about taxes for a second here. And after we do this interview, coming up later on, we'll talk about some of the developments that happened yesterday in Ottawa, namely in cutting immigration targets and in the Prime Minister announcing he is not going to step down as leader of the federal Liberal Party. And what is that going to mean as we get closer to an election? So stick around. All that coming up in part 2 of After 9. Right now, our special guest, he is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano. How you doing, Franco?
Hey, Scott, I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me on today.
I'm really happy you could come on, and the timing couldn't be better. There was a very, very concerning court ruling that came down recently, and I don't think the average person has caught on to this yet, but it really involves people who rent out their home on Airbnb and Vrbo and places like that. Can you give just a basic explanation of how Canadians are being taxed now?
Yeah, well, look, I think this ruling is another indication that the government is sniffing around our homes to take more money from us, right? So even if this ruling doesn't apply to you, I think you should be very concerned that the government keeps flirting with new home taxes. Okay, so the recent ruling from the Tax Court of Canada essentially shows that homeowners that rent out their homes regularly, right, through Airbnb or other short-term rental sites, must pay a 13% HST in Ontario on the property value when they sell their home. Okay, so, this could amount to a tax bill of tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So let's say you sell your home for $1 million, right? Well, if you are subject to these rules, then you could be paying $130,000 in tax. Now, it's important to underscore here that the short-term rentals must be on a consistent amount of time, right? Now, if you think this applies to you, reach out to a tax lawyer, reach out to an accountant. They would be better able to do this. But if you're regularly and consistently renting out your home on these types of apps like Airbnb, then you got to be worried that you might be paying a big tax bill.
Franco, how are they going to know that you're renting out your house when it comes time to sell that house?
Well, the threshold that they meet or that they say that you have to meet is a consistent short-term rentals, right? And then it'll be considered as commercial property. Now, they give a 90% threshold of renting out that property on short-term leases through like Airbnb and things of that nature. But I think your question brings up a very good point, right? There's obviously some type of subjective valuation that goes into this. And I've already seen some experts warn that, the rules aren't as clear-cut as someone might seem. But even more to the point here, with this type of ruling, I do believe you're giving the CRA, the tax bureaucrats, more power, right? More power to kind of go through data and snoop on Canadians. And look, the CRA is already massively bloated here in Canada, right? The CRA has 60,000 bureaucrats. Okay, so let's put that in perspective. In Canada, there's one tax bureaucrat for every 700 citizens. In the United States, in the IRS, there's one tax bureaucrat for every 4,000 citizens.
Wow. Oh, jeez. Why do we need that many tax collectors?
Well, we don't. But hey, the tax bureaucrats love it, right? More employment for those bureaucrats, more tax dollars for them. But Scott, can I kind of go back to what I think the crux of the issue is here? And the crux of the issue is that the federal government continues to snoop around our homes looking for more money. Okay? And let me give you some proof. So in 2016, the federal government made it mandatory for you to report the sale of your home with the CRA. Isn't that interesting, right? Now, we currently don't have a home equity tax here in Canada, which would apply capital gains on the sale of your home. But if the CRA isn't going to tax your home, then why does the CRA want that information?
Right.
Right? Is
Yes.
the CRA just curious?
No, they're not just curious. This is going somewhere. Hey, I mean, I've heard anecdotally over the years that there's been polling done by the Prime Minister's office and the federal government inquiring about whether or not it would be possible to tax people's primary residence. And so far, I think most Canadians are opposed to taxing our primary residence. This is kind of a backdoor way of doing it through the courts, though.
Well, you know what? It's not surprising to me that Canadians would tell the government to go kick rocks. You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing, right? For anyone who doesn't work in government or a politician, you're very unlikely to have a workplace pension. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the government bureaucrats, the politicians, they're getting these lucrative taxpayer-funded pensions. But by and large, the vast majority of people who work outside of government, well, you work your whole life to build up a nest egg in your home, and you use the sale of your home to help fund your golden years, right? Or to help get your kids and grandkids a leg up so that they could eventually afford a home. Well, a home equity tax could cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you know, this government under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has consistently flirted with a home equity tax, okay? Like Trudeau pinky promises he won't put in a home equity tax, but here's the numbers. The Trudeau government, with our tax dollars, has funded and promoted a report that recommends a form of a home equity tax to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Okay? And it's not just that. Like, let's not forget that the government has brought in a so-called anti-flipping tax. So if you sell your home faster than government bureaucrats think you should, watch out for the tax man. Or how about this? An underused housing tax, right? So if you're not using your house as the government thinks you should, well, get ready for the tax man. And also the recent capital gains tax increase. Now, that tax increase doesn't apply to your sale of your primary home
yet.
But if you have a secondary residence, you're paying. If you have a secondary residence that is a cottage, you're paying. And here's the final point. This government is broke. It has a $40 billion deficit. It's more than $1 trillion in debt. So you can expect that those government bureaucrats in Ottawa are flipping over the couch cushions looking for all the pennies and dollars and cents that it can take from you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's very, very frustrating, and it's concerning to see where it's going. To your point, the Prime Minister swears he's not going to tax a primary residence, but there seems to be more taxes creeping in on primary residences, this being one of them based on that court ruling. Is there anything people can do to fight back? I mean, it seems like our MPs are not listening to us and taking our concerns to Ottawa, or they don't care.
Yeah, well, you know what? A couple things, okay? So number one, what can you as an average citizen do to push back? So, I mean, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the group that I'm with, we are the leading organization in Canada making sure that the federal government does not impose a home equity tax on your home. So what can you do? Well, you can join the Canadian Taxpayers Federation free of charge. We have a petition saying no home equity tax. Sign that, and we'll give you updates on when it's time to push back against the government. Now, what can Trudeau or the federal government or the next Prime Minister of Canada, whoever that may be, do? Well, remove the reporting requirement with the CRA. Remember, I mentioned in 2016, the government made it mandatory for you to report the sale of your home with the CRA. Well, if the government isn't coming after your home with higher taxes, then it doesn't need to know how much you sold your home for. So if there's any politician listening, whether that's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whether that's another member of Parliament, or perhaps the future Prime Minister of Canada, well, if you want to prove that you're not going to impose new home taxes, then remove the reporting requirement with the CRA.
What is automatic tax filing? I'm reading this petition on taxpayer.com right now, and it's a petition to stop the federal government from auto-filing our taxes. Is this real?
Well, yes. The government is trying to expand the power of the CRA with new pilot projects, right? This is how they do it, folks. Little trial balloons, we'll just start small, and then all of a sudden you have big, bossy government at your door. So what's going on is the government is expanding the power of the CRA with pilot projects and automatic tax filing. Now, you know what, folks? Once you scratch beneath the surface, you can understand just how bad automatic tax filing from the government would be, right? Because here's the thing. The CRA's job is to take as much money from you as it can, right? But your job and your accountant's job is to make sure legally that you keep as much money of yours as you can. So think about the perverse incentive, right? You as a taxpayer want to keep more of your hard-earned money, and the government wants to take more of your hard-earned money. So you and your accountant work for you, but the broke government bureaucrats, they won't, right? So we're fighting tooth and nail against the automatic tax filing that the government seems intent on doing, because at the end of the day, if the government goes through with it, you can expect your tax bill to go up.
Right. Absolutely. I think probably I'm not going very far out on a limb to suggest the least popular tax that we Canadians pay is the carbon tax, and it's set to go up again in the spring.
Yeah, every year, April 1, Trudeau wants to crank up his carbon tax. And look, the reason that the carbon tax is completely unpopular is because it's a scam. Like, let's just put it that way, right? Number one, it makes the necessities of living in Canada more expensive, right? Canada is a big place. Well, the carbon tax makes it more expensive for you to fuel up your car, to drive to work, or to just drive to the store. Canada is a very cold place. Well, the carbon tax makes it more expensive for you to keep the heat on during the winter. And of course, we all need to eat. That goes without saying. But because the carbon tax taxes the farmer who grows the food, it taxes the truckers who deliver the food, the carbon tax is also making it more expensive for you to buy food whenever you go to do your grocery haul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are starting to realize that we do not get more back than we kick in. I mean, it's costing people money. I don't understand why the government keeps going with this tax that's this unpopular. Is it really just about the dollars and cents?
Well, it's about a couple things. But number one, let me talk about the rebates, right? Because you probably have heard Mr. Trudeau or one of his cabinet ministers try to spin you about the fact of what they claim, that Canadians are getting more than they pay. But, like, come on, right? Like, do not feed us that baloney. Because, like, everyone knows that you can't give the government $50 and then somehow get $100 back, right? Like, that should go without saying, and Canadians understand that. But it's not just me and you having this little chit-chat. The parliamentary budget officer, the government's own independent budget watchdog, shows that the carbon tax is costing, for example, the average Ontario family about $400 more this year than what they get back in rebates. By 2030, the carbon tax will cost the average Ontario family about $900 more than what they get back in rebates. And folks, those are annual costs. So the full cost between now and the end of 2030 for that average Ontario family is like $4,000 more than what they're getting back in rebates. Crazy. So this is huge.
They're flat out lying to us. I mean, they're spinning us, trying to convince us that our eyes are lying to us and our wallets are lying to us. It does cost more than we actually get back, right?
Of course it does. And here's another thing that the government doesn't want to talk about. So not only do they tax your fuel, but they tax those taxes. The federal government sales tax, the GST, is applied on top of the carbon tax. Okay? So this carbon tax on tax alone will cost about $400 million this year. And none of that carbon tax on tax money is rebated back to you.
Wow. I'm really glad you said that. Thank you. Because I don't think the average person fully understands what the point of the carbon tax is, or the fact that we're actually losing money here. And on top of all that, it's not even effective. I mean, what does Canada make up? 1.5% of the world's global emissions? Something like that?
Yeah, just under 1.4% of global emissions now, right? And that's the other point. Not only does it make literally nearly all essentials more expensive, but it's also ineffective. And here's why. Number one, people have to drive around in Canada, right? Or have to heat their homes or have to eat. So it's not like you can just say, well, I'm not going to drive to work. No, instead, you just have less money for other necessities of life. But number two, Canada makes up, as you point out, less than 1.5% of global emissions. In fact, there's about 70% of countries around the world who do not have a carbon tax, a national carbon tax. Okay? 4 of the 5 largest emitting countries in the world, Russia, India, Brazil, the United States of America, do not have a national carbon tax. So what the government is doing is punishing Canadians for the sin of driving to work, heating their homes, and buying food, while the vast majority of countries don't even have a national carbon tax.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive to me. It seems like a tax grab to me. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one who thinks that, because it's really hurting a lot of people. I mean, people are strapped for cash, and it seems like the government has got their hand in both our pockets now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and look, like, essentially what the carbon tax is saying, it's also a bit of a tool for power, right? Like, essentially what the carbon tax is do what we say or pay, right? But, like, look, like, these bureaucrats and these politicians who are obsessed with carbon taxes, think about their lifestyle, right? Whether they get to Zoom into meetings, whether they get to go to Parliament, walk to Parliament Hill, right, fly around the world or fly around the country on taxpayers' dime. Well, like, they're not paying the full brunt of the carbon tax. Who is paying the full brunt of the carbon tax?
Taxpayers.
The people who keep our economy going. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The people who have to fuel up their Dodge Ram to get to work, the people who work in shops, the people who work in factories, right? So the people who are obsessed with carbon taxes, they're not the ones paying the full brunt. It's the people, the working class people and businesses who keep the economy going.
You know, one more thing I want to touch on, because I know we're coming up on time here, but it's not just the taxes we pay. I think what frustrates Canadians is seeing how those tax dollars are spent. And it seems like there is so much waste in government spending that we pay all this money and we're all broke right now paying these taxes, and they don't even seem to respect that money. They're just blowing it. They're in Ottawa.
Just blowing it. So they're not doing the small things right. For example, the government spent $8 million building a barn at Rideau Hall. Huh?
A barn for $8 million.
For $8 million, okay? Another one, Trudeau and Entourage, last September, they spent $220,000 on airplane food during a 6-day trip to the Indo-Pacific region. $220K on airplane food. Or the Governor General spending $70,000 on limos in Iceland for a 4-day trip.
Wow.
Okay, it's waste. But then the big stuff. I know we're running out of time, so I'll be quick. The big stuff. The Trudeau government has hired an extra 108,000 bureaucrats in less than a decade. Ballooned the bureaucracy by 42% in less than a decade. Can anyone in government explain why we're paying so much for so little?
Well said. Hey, how do you guys stay operational there at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation? Do you have some sort of an income? Do people pay you? Do you get taxpayer money? How do you guys work?
We have never, ever taken a cent from the governments, okay? Never have, never will. We're completely funded by voluntary donations from Canadians. And if you want to take part, if you want to learn more about the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the best way to do it is to head over to taxpayer.com.
I also recommend people follow you on Twitter because you have, X, you have a fantastic account and a real great way of explaining things in plain and simple terms. And I think it's a great service that you're offering every single Canadian taxpayer, because if you just watch the CBC, for example, you never know exactly what you're getting screwed over on.
Well, yeah, if you want to follow me, I'm at Franco_nomics, at Franco_nomics. And you can essentially just follow us everywhere on social media. Just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Love it. Franco Terrazzano, thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great weekend, and good luck. Keep fighting the good fight for us.
Hey, my pleasure. Happy we were able to have this chat.
Okay, let's get to part 2 of After 9 here. As promised, we're going to follow up on a conversation that we had in yesterday's After 9. First and foremost, the Prime Minister announced he's not going anywhere. We'll get to that in just a sec. First off, let's talk about immigration. The latest polling is out, and it says Canadians are very concerned about the amount of people coming to this country. We're bringing people to this country, and we don't necessarily have homes for them. We don't necessarily have jobs for them, but we're bringing them here anyway. And that has people concerned. We're seeing tent cities pop up everywhere. We've seen an increase in all kinds of things. It's a demand on healthcare. It's a demand on jobs, a demand on the economy, and so much more. So with immigration being as high as it is and the polling saying Canadians have noticed and they don't like it, yesterday an announcement from the Prime Minister that we are going to cut our immigration targets. The original plan was to bring in 500,000 new permanent residents in both 2025 and 2026. That's on top of everybody else who's already here. Now Ottawa is cutting the target to 395,000 permanent residents for the first year, and then 365,000 by 2027. Here's a little bit of the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday.
Canadians are justifiably proud of our immigration system. It has made our economy the envy of the world. It's how we've built strong, diverse communities. It's how we've demonstrated that differences can and must be a source of strength, not a source of weakness for communities and society. Immigration is vital to our future. And as a federal government, we have to make sure that that pride, that faith in immigration is not undermined. We've been through a hard time these past few years. COVID stopped everything. When we started to emerge from it, workers were in short supply, things we needed weren't going to market, and prices started going up. So we acted. We made sure that our businesses had workers. Our economy got moving again, and we actually experienced the fastest jobs recovery after the pandemic in the G7. Now, it is time to make the adjustments to stabilize the immigration system that we need and get it working right for Canadians.
So what you just heard the Prime Minister say is they did it with the best of intentions, and everything has gone amazing until right now. Before now, everything was good. We were on the right track. We were helping businesses. We were doing what we had to do. But now, just out of the blue, out of nowhere, the whole thing has gone south, and Canadians are starting to turn on the idea of immigration. By the way, I agree wholeheartedly with the Prime Minister in that diversity is our strength in this country. Immigrants built this country, and we should never, ever forget that. But it's a different situation now. The economy is real bad. Canadians are overtaxed, they are overworked, and frankly, they don't see much light on the horizon. But they do see a lot of people coming here, and like I said, we don't have homes for many of these people. We don't necessarily have jobs for most of these people. This was all very predictable when they started bringing in a massive amount of people with no real plan for them. And maybe you're thinking, well, there's no way that they could have known that we were going to have a housing crisis. Maybe there's no way they could have known that this would put a huge tax on our health care. Nope, they knew. Listen to this.
There are a lot of pressures on our system. Increasing the immigration levels, interestingly, will take some of the pressure off of the system because the stream on bringing in permanent residents has got room to bring in more, and it's when people come as refugees and try to flip or get refugee crisis status that it sort of slows down the system a little bit. So increasing the levels will actually help bring in more people to respond to that.
That was the Prime Minister just a couple of years ago. Just a couple of years ago, talking about how he actually used the example. Maybe you're worried that we won't have enough homes for them. Don't worry, they're going to come here and build homes. A lot of them are skilled trades workers. But where were they going to live while they were building the homes? And what happens if interest rates go so crazy that developers do not want to invest anymore into building homes? The whole thing was not well thought through. We've brought a lot of people here, I think unfairly to them and unfairly to Canadians. We shouldn't have done what we did, but we're in the situation now, and they're going to reduce the targets. I'm a little worried that these targets are high. They're celebrating the fact that they're decreasing the number by 20%. Still 395,000 more new permanent residents coming to Canada next year. And the year after that, in 2027, another 365,000 people. If we've got the room, if we've got the resources, if we can afford it, I say absolutely. Let's bring people here that want to come here and want to be part of Canada and contribute to our society. That would be great. But we can't bring them here if we don't have the basics to make sure that they have a good life here. So that was a big one yesterday for the Prime Minister. The other thing was, you'll recall that on Wednesday, a group of Liberal members of the government's caucus confronted Justin Trudeau, and they said to him, we want you to step down. We want you to resign. Take some time to think about it. We want an answer by October the 28th, Monday. Well, the Prime Minister did not need until Monday. He announced yesterday he's staying. And then the leader of the opposition was asked about that very question. Pierre Poilievre was asked about Justin Trudeau sticking around. He was asked about those 24 MPs that sent the letter to Trudeau asking for him to resign, because we don't know what they're going to do. They could just carry on, business as usual, life as normal, like the letter never got sent. But it did get sent. And when you go as far as to call for someone's resignation, if they don't actually resign, what are you going to do about it? It's on you then to react. I had a great DM conversation with 2 or 3 After 9 listeners yesterday on Instagram. People asking about that. Some speculating that those Liberals may flip to the Conservatives. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think that would be good either. I don't think that they can wear red today and go to wearing blue tomorrow like nothing's happened, especially after everything that's happened. I speculated that they might sit as independents. Why would they sit as Liberals if they don't want the leader of the Liberal Party leading the Liberal Party? If they're worried about their electoral fortunes, they should probably sit as independents. Now, I have no doubt they'll still vote with the Liberals, but is it possible they would sit as independents or as Liberals and vote with the Conservatives? That's bananas, if you ask me. I never saw that one coming. But here's Pierre Poilievre being asked about that very phenomenon.
Yes.
Have you had any conversations with disaffected Liberal MPs about them starting to vote with the opposition or crossing the floor?
I have had conversations with numerous Liberal MPs. Some of them say that they're worried that the carbon tax will cost them their seats and that they want to vote against Trudeau's radical plan to quadruple the tax to 61 cents a litre. And some of them might even be willing to vote non-confidence in Justin Trudeau if that issue comes up again.
Wow. Liberals that would actually vote non-confidence in their own government over the carbon tax. Very, very interesting, and it takes me back to that great conversation with Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. A shout out to him. Thank you very much again for being on this episode of After 9. I'd love to keep going because there's Diddy news, and it involves Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx has come out, well, he's recording some Netflix comedy specials right now, and people who were at the tapings have started to leak some of it, suggesting things like Diddy poisoned Jamie Foxx. And that's what that medical emergency was last year, where he almost died. A lot of rumors floating around. I guess we'll have to wait for the actual special to come out, but it is an interesting theory, which I do not know if Jamie Foxx supports it. These are people who were at the taping that said they heard him talking about various Diddy. Actually, he was making some Diddy jokes, and it did come up. Jamie says if Diddy wanted him dead, he'd be dead. So I guess that speaks to how powerful Diddy is. Either way, we'll get to that next week on After 9. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and I'm going to ask you all, because it's so important that we keep this time-honored tradition going. The Royal Canadian Legion is kicking off their annual Poppy campaign today. It's going to run right through until November the 4th. Poppy sales help benefit veterans groups and the Legion. Please wear a poppy proudly and support the Legion. Have yourselves a great weekend, everybody. I'll catch you right back here on Monday.
A woman in Bangladesh recently set the Guinness World Record for most grains of rice eaten one at a time using chopsticks. Cool, said the couple waiting for the table.
Should be a fun Halloween. There's a chance you could see someone dressed as the Menendez brothers, and then there's a chance you could actually see the actual Menendez brothers. Really.
A New Zealand airport is asking passengers and their drivers to limit their farewell hugs to a maximum of 3 minutes, while LaGuardia requires you to shove your departing loved ones out of a moving car. Just tuck and roll, Alice. Just text me from Prague.
American Airlines has begun testing a new boarding system, while Frontier is sticking with knife fights.